Hello, and welcome to One Voice Live, where we talk about One Voice, what it is, and how it fits into the world of singing. I'm your host, Zeto, and I'm joined today by creator of One Voice, Michael Maresca, making it happen. So today we're continuing our series called Changing Our Vocal Perspective, where we talk about how One Voice is changing what we think we know to be true about singing. And the topic for today is the importance of a common language. I want to start off, Michael. What is a common language? If you were to teach me a voice lesson, we would both be speaking in English. So what exactly do you mean by using a common language?
I'm going to go macro for a second, and then I'll go micro. So taking a big picture look, a good example of language being something that's essential is a place like China. Well, China actually has like thousands of languages, thousands, which is mind-blowing. And it's because each village and town often has their own language that they use. Issue is that no one moving across China could actually communicate very well. Some people kind of could, and then you had people who go from town to town, who live around a couple towns, they'd be able to speak to each other. And so it was kind of a fail in ability to actually communicate and communicate effectively and efficiently. So it became this long, drawn-out process of doing things. Well, recently, in the last like 40 years, 50 years, they started coming up with having a common language. It might be more than that, but it was coming up with a common language, and more importantly, a common writing language. And for those of you who are watching and know this, you can probably chime in on this and let me know what I'm missing, because I'm sure I'm missing something on this. But having a common language, and the language was through writing so that you could communicate. So even if you spoke in one of the 1,000 languages and you can't talk with the other person across from you, you actually both now have a common writing language that you can describe and talk with. It's like as if everyone in the United States did not speak the same language, but we all knew sign language. We could still speak through sign language. Really fascinating, really, and even to this day, most people don't speak the same language in China, which is pretty incredible. So that now coming to a micro view, what has happened in the world of singing is, I think because of, and some of you have heard me talk about this that are listening now, we have had a language that's very limited, and because the language is limited, this is why we see things every year being added to our dictionaries, because what we're experiencing is a change in language. Our language sometimes doesn't always articulate clearly what it is that we're trying to communicate to someone. I often tell people, I'll say that language is really a failed effort in communication. It does the best that it can, but we still don't have words for everything that we experience and or see in the world, which is why we then start trying to cobble other descriptors into what we're saying to try and be clearer about what it is we're trying to communicate to someone. So in the world of singing, for a long time, we've had a very limited language, and I think that's also in part because we've had a view of singing being very religious and very like, this is the way it is, and this is how singing is. And because of that, I've gotten stuck, I think, in many ways, unfortunately, in that this is the way it is, this is the way it's been forever. We seem to hold on to that, and I don't know why we do that so tightly in the world of singing, but we do. And because of that, we've had all kinds of new things come up in the world of singing, obviously, in the last like 300 years. Lots have changed, lots of things have changed, and particularly in the last 50 years, a lot has changed. And the progression that we've had has far outgrown our language. What ends up happening is you have all these teachers around the world who are trying to communicate something. They're trying to say, hey, I want you to do this thing that is... when you sing it again, what I want you to do is I want you to sing with a brighter tone that is rounded and maybe a little squishy, right? And you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm going to guess and hope that maybe we come close to the same thing. And so you shoot for it, and either you get it or you don't, And it's kind of a shot in the dark, which is kind of super terrible, not fun, frustrating as a teacher and as a student, because you're really just trying to understand what your teacher's offering you, and your teacher's trying to be very clear about what they're offering you. So of course at the end they say, does that make sense? And you say, yes, thank you, that makes sense. I will make a fluffy, round, clear, bright sound, whatever that means. And none of these have anything to do with actual sound production. They're all descriptors of sound, which is very difficult because it can be interpreted in many, many different ways. And so having a common language, which is part of what the one voice theories have really brought to us, a whole new language has been born. And for you one voicers out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You now have a language that you can be very articulate with. Instead of the music director saying something like, or the producer saying, hey, let's take this take again. What I want is the sound to be more like roundish and like sparkle through. What does that even mean? Instead, they could say, hey, let's take that again. Could you go ahead and do it with a larger vocal track this time and increase the weight just a little bit? And let's go and do that at a quiet volume. Boom. Yes, boom. Makes total. I know exactly what all of those things are, and they're very clear. And that's what's so awesome, is because it just makes communication so much more efficient. And because it makes communication efficient, we then, as a byproduct of that, then have the ability to progress. We have the ability to move forward. Instead of getting stuck with trying to explain this one thing, we can explain it and we can move on. So it makes teaching just umpteen times more effective and more efficient. And a lot of you who have been in master classes with us have experienced that, or in sessions. You know, we get to directly to the thing right away. It's very exciting. And more importantly and more amazingly, for those of you who've gotten a chance to experience a one voice master class, you've probably also noticed that when you're in the master class, the one voice master who's heading the master class will say something like, cool. They'll ask you the questions and say, what do you hear? What's happening, using the one voice theories? And then you have the whole class answering what's happened. When was the last time that you were in a class that happened? And if it did, it got really awkward. And then everyone's like, I need to make sure and say the right answer so the teacher's happy with me. You actually know, because it actually makes sense. And that's one of the things I get all the time from people, as I'm sure you do as well, Alex, and I know all the coaches do, because I hear about it all the time. People just say, gosh, it just makes so much sense. It's just so clear. And that to me is probably one of the most exciting, most fulfilling things to hear people say, because it's like struggling through mud until something gets clear. And it's cool to be able to be on the other side and say, hey, here's the clear stuff. It's really fun.
So cool. Oh, it's so good. It's one of my favorites.
I get passionate about this all the time. It's like, that like fires me up.
This common language is maybe I mean, that's hard to say, but it's one of my favorite things about one voice.
Yeah, agreed. Because it's so easy to talk about. You can talk about it. That's why, I guess, you know, it's like the bare minimum, I feel, of good communication is just having words that mean the same thing. Literally. Weird idea.
Yeah, crazy.
That's where we are. That's where we are right now, right?
So I had an interesting question when I was at TPAP. Someone raised their hand and they said, what if I like, and I thought it was actually a really smart question I never heard before. I like imagery and it works for me.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that, essentially?
What's the rebuttal to that?
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, I'm just going to give a shout out to the Performing Arts Project. Yeah. It's a phenomenal organization that puts on, I think right now they now have 3 programs that they put on over the summer. One's called Blueprint. It's for like college audition prep for those going into acting or musical theater. And then there is something called Compass, which is drawing and dance for people who are working on that. And then there's also another one that's more like an artist retreat for people in college, moving into college, etc., about really understanding how to live and survive in the world as an artist and do that really successfully. So really super cool Performing Arts Project. If you don't or haven't seen it, check it out, and you should also follow them. They're amazing human beings. And if you're lucky enough to go there, we hope to see you there next year. So, okay, that's amazing. Vocal imagery, what do I say to that?
Will you give an example of vocal imagery?
Absolutely. Yeah. Similar to what I was talking about just a minute ago. In terms of vocal imagery, an example of that might be, Alex, next time you sing this, I want you to think of the sound as being a horn that's coming out of the center of your head, okay? And imagine at the same time that you've got jello in your stomach, okay, that's really weighting you down, and that your feet have roots in them. They go down into the earth, okay? And even while you have this horn here, the mane, you're going to have a mane, just like all horses do, and that mane is actually going to be lifting you up in the back, right? So here's like all this stuff, which then they say, does that make sense? And you're like, yeah, of course. And what's funny is that more people, this is interesting, I was talking to someone about this recently, they found that more people theatrically, who are in the world of theater, musical theater, tend to do a lot better, or are more successful, I should say, at interpreting imagery than people who are not in theater world. Because most of the time, people in theater world are like playing improv games and imagination games and all this stuff, right? Whereas other people don't have as much or nearly the success as they do. Very interesting. But that being said, even more successful is direct language. Far more successful because there's no guessing. It's clarity, which is a very different game to play. It's one thing to have someone drive a car and to say, all right, so when you're driving the car this time, you're going to be like a vessel moving through the car. And as you go, you want to think forward. Instead, I could just tell you, take the steering wheel in your hands and hold it straight. Now, take your right foot and push on the gas. It's very specific, and I'm telling you exactly what it is. Now, could both of those arrive at the same outcome? Yes, they could. If vocal imagery is helpful for you, there's nothing wrong with vocal imagery. For me, it's about understanding what the vocal imagery is being used for. So if I'm just saying something because it worked with one person and hopefully it'll work with you, I don't really know why I'm using that vocal imagery. So I'm actually losing efficacy. And the point, if I'm going to do something, it might be like this. You say, Michael, what does heavyweight feel like? Okay, well, heavyweight, when you're trying to achieve a heavyweight, you're having a high vocal cord intensity. So some people might say it feels like a pinching in their larynx if they're not used to it. Some people might say it feels like it's harder to sing. Some people might say that it feels like there's a fist or a hand gripping, right? Or it feels like they're getting smaller. Like all those things are just images, right? That may be helpful for someone, but I'm creating all of those images because I have a focus on what that is. Right, so I have a clear focus on what the point of my imagery creation is for you.
Love that. What did Bella say? Zeto described this with a watermelon analogy. I love that. Yeah. So this is just, thank you, Bella. This is the idea of me asking someone, I need you to go to the grocery store and get me a watermelon, but we don't have the word for grocery store, watermelon, fruit, or round. So I'm like, can you go to the place and get me the sweet thing to eat, the sweet num num,
phenomenal. And you're like, it's this
thing,
num num,
yeah, num num, yeah. And
gosh,
my favorite part about that analogy is that some people would come back with a watermelon, but some people will come back with a slushy, an apple slushy. So
yeah, well, you name it, 100 different things. Excellent.
And I think that's the other risk of imagery is, again, just the lack of specificity. We don't know exactly what works for one person might not work for another. Kind of what Jackson and I were talking about with the vocal tract the other day, when someone will say, drop your jaw, hoping your vocal tract will extend. Some people that will work, some people it won't. And if you're doing the thing that they're telling you to do, shooting the laser through your eyes or whatever, what else is going to come with that when you don't know what the exact goal is?
Excellent. That's so good. Yeah, because you might just be just like the brain patterns. I think I don't know if I mentioned this or not on a previous show, but I had this weird brain pattern thing when I was when I was working out a while ago, and I was doing curls, and every time I do a curl, this is after I would up my weight. So I'd up my weight and I start doing curls, and my left lip would just start curling every time I'd curl the weights. It's so bizarre. Does this have anything to do with lifting? No, nothing at all. Ridiculous, right? So my body had patterned that, and I love that clarification in language, or that language can bring, a clear language can bring clarity to what your body is trying to accomplish. So if I know that all I should be doing when I'm driving the car is pushing on the gas and keeping the wheel straight, if I know that that's what I'm after, then I know that if my left leg is kicking the door, that's an issue. Because my left leg shouldn't be doing anything, right? That's not what, and my left hand's reaching out the window. This is all not what we need, right? And we only know that because of clarity, having clarity of language. Yeah, that's an excellent example. I love that. I love that you said that.
So back to the student question, we talked about a lot of things, but what exactly would you say to that student who said, what if I like using imagery and it works for me?
I would say, as long as you continue, feel free all day. I support using imagery as long as the stipulation is as long as we are clear what's underneath it. If we don't know why we're rooting our feet into the ground, what the actual aim for that is, then what are we saying, right? If you know what that means, great, go for it. But if you don't, I would challenge you, human, wherever you are, hopefully you're watching this, I'm going to challenge you to try and understand what the actual purpose is. Now, if you get to a answer that is, well, it's to ground you, what does grounding mean? What does that actually mean, to be grounded, right? I'm going to venture to say you also don't know what that means either, because it's another vague descriptor term, right? To be grounded, what does that mean exactly, right? Some people think it means to plant their feet in the ground, to have flat feet on the ground, both feet, not lean on one foot or the other. Some people think it means sitting back into their hips and pushing their hip forward. What does it look like? What does it mean? And why do we call it grounded when we see someone who we call grounded? What are they doing behaviorally that makes us think that? So that's what that would be my challenge and my stipulation for it, is that there's clarity as to what it exists for, and then really trying to gain access to why am I using this? What's the purpose? And I'm going to venture to say that once you find the real purpose, you'll probably stop using the imagery. It just takes long. A waste of time when you already know what you're doing. It's like you telling me to go to the grocery store. Just tell me to get a watermelon at the grocery store. Great. And we know what a watermelon is, right? I know that a watermelon is not an apple, right? Or an Oreo.
I sometimes think that One Voice is the equivalent of a kid asking their parents, like, why? Like,
constantly.
Where are you going? To the kitchen. Why? Because I'm hungry. Why? Because my body needs fuel. Why? Because, and you're just like, until you get to like that root answer that you can't possibly go any deeper.
Yes. And if I might button that, or add to that rather, that is like, that's like the core. That's like the core of our culture. And for all you One Voicers out there, hoorah, and keep up the energy with that, because asking questions is exhausting. Trust me, I know. It is exhausting. Alex knows. It's exhausting. We all know. Keep it up, because it only leads to greater clarity. Even though the journey can be really tough, you just lead to greater clarity. And what a gift that is. What a gift.
Any last minute thoughts on the importance of a common language that you haven't covered yet?
Just a last kind of re-comment perhaps, or maybe a summarization of that. I think we give up too quickly sometimes, or we accept too fast. And I don't think it hurts to challenge or secretly challenge something that we hear or use in our everyday. If I can encourage everyone to not be afraid. Even if someone's like, well, you're a psychopath, that's fine. That's fine. You don't need to tell them. You can quietly or secretly disagree with someone, and that's okay. And you can secretly question what the term means that you're using to try and understand it. And I will say this because I think this is important. Because One Voices out there will be working and do work with other people who teach singing, and those people are not going to know the answer. If I could offer this way of thinking to you, your aim is never to put someone in a corner and make them feel dumb or stupid. The aim is rather to find clarity for yourself. They might be happy where they're at. It's not necessarily your job to, I don't believe, it's not your job to fix them, as it were. But if they challenge you and you want to challenge back, I think that's fair game. But I do think it's helpful to keep that in your brain, that it's your journey and not someone else's, as you work through trying to dig deeply to understand. Because you're going to hit roadblocks, and you're going to hit people who don't have an answer for that. And that's okay. Move on. Yeah. Go to the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of students going to college next year, and they keep asking me, what do I do?
What am I going to do?
What am I going to do? They're like, how do I talk with my teacher? And I told them a very, very similar something, which is it's your job to make it make sense in your brain. And also, we're always here. Like, you can, if you really get stumped. But I think they're well equipped enough that if they ask the questions, and they'll figure out what exactly it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and getting translation. You know, I mean, that's one of the that's a series that's going to come up in the future here, which I'm so excited for Alex to launch in the future. It's translating and learning how to translate what you hear in the world, which is so exciting. Like, if I can just, even if you're saying something that is like some ethereal, doesn't make any sense thing, I can take that and I can say, I see what you're looking for. You're asking for this, boop, 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 and then I can turn around and actually deliver on that request, which is really cool. There was actually someone who I work with she's a One Voicer in Canada, and she was going to college, and she was like juggling One Voice and her coaches there, and it was amazing because she was like, yeah, you know what, I feel like I can translate so well. And she's like a language translator of singing. And it's really amazing because she like flows. She like gets all these things. Someone's like, oh yeah, well you're like gonna get into your mix, and her brain immediately is like, oh yeah, so mid-weight and a lot of volume, and just like immediately just like passes through it. Very, very cool.
So cool.
It can be done, and is ultimately I found that everyone's just better for it, smarter singers, which is really cool.
I feel like a wizard when I do it. Yeah, I love that conversation so much. Common language, dude. It is where it's at. Okay, this leads us to our question segment.
Questions.
We need jingles for these.
We need a jingle for that. Well, yeah, okay. We're going to come up with one. You all listen for it because it's going to show up in the next show.
It's going to happen. Okay, great. This question is from Make It Happen. Sophie D, and she says, what do you put on sign-in sheets and resumes if you can sing both the alto and soprano line? Which is a great question. And in my opinion, I would put both. If you can do both, I say put both. And then the beauty of that is then you become the magic person that if we're lacking sopranos, you can go there. If we're lacking altos, you can go there, and you can fill in where you're needed. As far as how to put it on your resume, it's your choice. You get to write whatever you want. I used to put soprano belter because I was like, let's cut to the chase. I know some people put their vocal ranges. The tricky thing about that, and Michael, I want your opinion on this too, is we don't know what weight you're singing into what range at what note. So it's a little vague. Then again, it's the people behind the table. It's their job also to get the information they need by asking you to sing, to vocalize you, blah, blah, blah. But Michael, what's your opinion on this?
Running back to what you were just saying about voice labeling with being a soprano versus a belter, those don't actually mean what they mean, kind of. Soprano, if you think of like old school terms, soprano's like a high singer. That's not the same meaning in musical theater these days. It generally means someone who can sing in a classical shape. In one voice terms, it's singing with a large vocal tract and a lighter weight, particularly for women. And that's what soprano means. Belting just means heavyweight loud, and doing that in probably middle, right? A high belter means someone who can do all the way throughout middle and then possibly up into head coordination with holding heavyweight. But that being said, Sophie, I would love to add to what Alex was saying in terms of putting it all on there, but also specifying, soprano belter to these notes, or a belter to these notes, and soprano these notes. And you can also say alto range, I sing this as well. What I'm gonna make as a qualifier for you is ask yourself what kind of story you're trying to tell on your resume when you give it to somebody. So just be my personal recommendation. If you're going in for something that's like belter, that's really all we need on there. I would just have a specific resume, take it in with that. If you're wanting to go for a show where you're going to give me the jazzy low singer person, and you feel like you really rock that, awesome. Just really show me that. People get all weird about who people are. And Jackson Perrin, who was on last week on the show, said it's really great. He was talking about people saying, well, I just want your authentic sound. What's your authentic voice, right? And it's really an illusion, having an authentic sound. It's about having something close to what you sound like when you speak, which is also another fabricated thing that we've created growing up through observation, through demonstration, replication, all of that. And so I just want to say another cryogenization. I just wanted to add that. It has nothing. Needed to add another Asian. But but he said something really great. He said, I don't really know why people get stuck on this, because the reality is that all the sounds that come out of our mouths are our sounds. They're all authentic sounds to us. They are our sounds. And I understand what people are asking for when they say an authentic sound. So it's just something that you sound like when you walk in the room. And that's what people are going to expect to hear, usually. For a classical piece, people will they're okay and accept a larger vocal tract change. Not insane, but they do accept it. So that's it. I'm going to add that to it.
This also relates back to the common language a bit, because what I would love to say is I can grade a heavyweight up to this note.
So much easier.
Yeah, but
so much easier.
But again, this is where the translating comes in, and you have to make it easy for them. Exactly.
Yeah, my hope would be that we would have eventually that what we'll start seeing as one voice moves into the bigger part of the industry or becomes more accepted in this way, is that what you'll see on a breakdown is you'll see something that says need females that can sing a D5 with heavyweight. That's so clear. That's so clear. That's just awesome. So I think those are really exciting things. Or bypassing that entirely, and they would say we just want women, speaking to simply a gender classification, you'd say we just want women who can sustain a high E on heavyweight with heavyweight, or sing a soprano high C or C6, lightweight and a large vocal tract. Like, how cool would that be? That's so much easier.
So clear.
You could say we just want high belters. Like, what does that even mean? What notes are we talking about? What do you need? But that's the world we live in right now. That we are going to try and change everybody. Okay, we're working on it.
Yeah. And they say high belters, and you'll have anywhere from a midweight to a heavyweight, all different kinds of volumes, all different kinds of vocal tracts. It's like totally different sounds, which is also like the beauty of it. Some of it's flexible. Like, you don't have to have a certain vocal tract shaping to be belting. But if you're looking for that, though, how cool would it be to ask for it specifically? Sophie, thank you so much for your question. The rest of you one voicers, please submit questions to questions.singonevoice.com. Not only can you submit questions, but we now have a way to submit audio clips. So submit your favorite singers, submit your best friend, submit you, and say, what is this person doing? And let's talk about it. Next week, I will be joined again by Michael Maresca, and we're going to be talking about the TEDx talk that he did at Texas State University. Yeah, so that'll be fun. Same time, same place, Instagram, Wednesday at 1:30 CT. We will see you there. Thanks, guys. Bye, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye.